Hi, my name is Spela Giacomelli. A little fun fact about me, I think I'm the only person with this name in the world because it's Italian surname and it's a Slovenian name. It's spelled Sh, if you're interested. I'm a software engineer at Jackosoft, and I also author tutorials and courses at testdriven.io. One of the courses I authored is Django with HTMX and Tailwind. Tailwind is not important in this part, but that's why I'm here today, to show you how to combine Django with HTMX. I'm going to start with a representation of HTMX. Then we'll see how to add HTMX to your Django application. And at the end, I'm going to tell you not everything is suitable for HTMX, and why not. So, who here's like JavaScript? Raise your hands. OK, that's really not a lot of hands. Who here, maybe one of you 5, feels comfortable using JavaScript? OK, more or less the same hands. I never liked JavaScript. I actually worked as a front-end developer. I never got used to JavaScript. So a little bad news for those of you who didn't raise their hands. HTMX is not a replacement for a full-fledged front-end framework. But a little bad news of those 6 of you who raised their hands. We're not going to write any JavaScript in this. So HTMX is a library that allows direct server interaction with HTML. This means you don't have to leave the HTML file. You just need to add few attributes. And the request that is triggered, the response that is returned is pure HTML. That pure HTML is then put back into your HTML page without fully reloading as we're used from Django. I'm going to start with the simplest example possible, just so you can see how HTMX works. This is not really Django specific for now. I filmed all my, those are all screen recordings, so I don't need to switch between my PowerPoint presentation, code, and browser. So pay attention to the button here. Once the user clicks, the joke appears, and if you can check here, the response is directly HTML. And second, the initiator, as you can see, is HTMX. I hope you can see from up close. It's not very readable. But the initiator here is HTMX, so the browser always knows it comes from HTMX. And as you saw, it was just a piece of HTML, no JSON or something like that. This is the code that does what you just saw. Aside from the URL, which is pure Django, the 3 attributes all cover what we needed. hxget is the heart of HTMX. The hxget triggered the HTTP request to the random joke. hxswap means the inner HTML, so not the whole element, this div ID here with ID joke. Only this part, the content, will be updated by the response. The hxtarget is how we set which part of the HTML will be replaced. If we'd leave the hxtarget out, the button's content would be replaced by the response in this case. The only part we really needed here is the hxget. The hxswap, which is inner HTML, is actually the default value, so it's here only so you can see what it does. If we would leave it out, the result will still be the same. Let's talk about HTMX attributes a little bit more. There's around 30 of them. Using those 4, you can cover most of what you need. As I said, the hxget is the main thing here. It's the heart of HTMX. You can replace it with hxpost, hxput, hxpatch, or hxdelete. Without one of those, there's no HTMX. You can't trigger anything. All the other attributes more or less change the default behavior. So hxdelete triggers a delete request. hxpost triggers a post request. The second attribute you'll probably use is hxtarget. The default value is this. You can also write this to be more explicit, but without setting the hxtarget, the element triggering the request would be replaced. Typical way is to use CSS selector with ID, as you saw. You can also trigger closest, find, or next and previous, which means ancestor, child, and sibling, all can be targeted. The third important is HX swap. As I mentioned, inner HTML is the default. That means the inner content will be replaced. Outer HTML means that everything will be replaced. So in case of the button would disappear and be replaced by the response. You can also target before or after begin. That means that right before the element or right at the start of the element, or before and after end, right at the bottom of the element or after it ended. The fourth important one is HX trigger. Since the request is automatically triggered by the element's natural event, so a button click, a form submit, you won't always use it. But you can change the default behavior, so instead of the button click, you could send the request when the mouse is scrolling to the button. Or you can even use some HTMX-specific non-standard events. One of the most interesting is revealed. We'll see it in action later on, which means the request is triggered once the element is scrolled into the viewport. You can also set multiple events. For example, in a search box, you would likely want to respond to the key app and to the search event. Now, this is the first real example. I prepared 3. As before, this is a screen recording. This is the way click to edit. So once the user edits the forum, clicks the edit button, the forum appears. The edit is performed, the save is clicked, and it's back again replaced by the details. So if you check here, if you can see, here the HTML keeps changing from the forum to the detail. Now I'm going to show you, which is the HTML code that covers this part. Those 2 are the templates you need. They are both child templates. They have a joint parent template, which is not really important here, so I left it out. Let's focus on the HX attributes. So HX get, you already met it. You know that it triggers a GET request. The target, again, nothing special. The whole ID, the whole div with ID recipe. And the HX swap here is changed, so the whole recipe will be replaced by the forum on the right side. The forum has a HX put. I think you can explain it to yourself. It's a put request to, again, Django URL. The HX swap outer HTML, also nothing different. Maybe what we should focus on is HX target, which is on the right side, it's this. On the left side is ID recipe. That's because the element triggering request in the first example, it's much smaller than what we want to replace. The target on the right side is actually the same as the element triggering the request, so we want to replace exactly the same element as it was triggered the request from. Just for a quick idea, this is pure Django, so you can know that get and put are in this example in the same view. This is not necessary. Actually, it can be easier to understand how HTMX works with Fast API, because Django does so much magic for us that it can be confusing a little bit at the start, because get returns the form and the put processes the form. As far as HTMX is concerned, this could be made to entirely separate endpoints in entirely separate URLs. You have a lot of moving parts when you're trying to use HTMX with Django. So here's a graph so you can easier understand it. The top part is loaded by the browser. Recipe detail page, plain Django. The only important part up there is that recipe detail partial contains details which were taken out of the parent template, and they are then being put back in. That's so we can first have some setup. We replace a chunk of HTML code, and once we do something with it, we put the same chunk of the code back. This is almost the main thing of combining Django and HTMX. You take something out, you include it back directly as include, as you know you're used from Django, and then at some point, some other endpoint will call this template separately. Then once edit button is clicked, the HTML request is made to the get endpoint. This time the form template is returned. And once the user clicks the save button, the put request is made to the same URL. But this time the partial template of the detail is returned. And the user, for their view, is actually back to where they started. We know that we came back to this point from a very different road. This is also important to understand. You get the same look, but the way you get it, it's different. OK, the next example I prepared is the endless scroll. In this, you have 6 recipes, and once the user scrolls to the bottom of it, the next 6 are added. Pay attention, maybe we missed it. Maybe you saw the HTML text keep adding up. So we started with pagination. I'm going to show you now. You know the paginate by. The thing you maybe never saw before was the get template names. This is the way how Django finds out which template needs to be used. And it's not typical to override it. But here, another fact that is important, we know that HTMX made the request because it sends the HX request header each time. So using those two knowledges, we can change the template we select. OK, I wanted to show you the later part. We're going to see how the select works. So the if part, again, Django, for loop last, and object has next. That's because we're only interested in HX attributes to be added at the last recipe currently on the page. All the other recipes, normal div, nothing happens. HX target is, again, this. HX get, similar. You're going to see if you're going to use HTMX by yourself, you keep repeating the same patterns. And what's maybe more interesting is HX swap after end. I mentioned that before. This means that the new 6 recipes will be added after the last recipe on the page. So not inside the div that has ID this recipe, but after it. If we would use beforehand, the recipes would be loaded inside the last recipe. The revealed, I mentioned, this is a custom HTMX trigger, which triggers the request once the element, recipe in this case, is scrolled into the viewport. Again, I love those graphics. I think they're very good at explaining what's happening. What's interesting here is we only need a single view. We also only need 2 templates, both of which are used once the first time browser loads it. So the user gets the whole page. They scroll down. They encounter the element that has those HX attributes. And the GET request is triggered. The response are added after it. The user scrolls again. The process repeats. Since we added the if, for loop last, and next page, only the last page will be loaded, and the last page won't have those attributes. OK, so the third example I prepared is not so much about how to do something. I just wanted to show you what can be done using HTMX. This is a list of ingredients. You can filter through it. You can edit an ingredient. You can also add a new ingredient. And since cream doesn't belong in carbonara, don't kill me, you can also delete. the ingredient. I put together this in about 30 minutes. Once you're used to it, you can be very fast with the HTMX. However, this has a lot of endpoints. On the left side, there are actions you can perform. So you can search. You can search for ingredient, edit ingredient, save ingredient you edited. You add a new ingredient, and you can delete the ingredient. Search has a single HTMX request, which is hexpose to recipe ingredient search. The search then is posted to the search ingredient partial, and the partial ingredients list is updated. Edit ingredient requires the get request to recipe ingredient update. The update ingredient is first called get. Partial ingredient update is called. And when you save that ingredient, you go to the same Django view, but this time with a put request. And I think I dropped an arrow. So this time, I think I dropped the most interesting one. Wait a minute. Update ingredient. So yeah, once you make a put request, because the ingredient is now updated, the partial single ingredient is now returned. I mentioned this is the most interesting part, because the partial single ingredient is actually returned twice, 3 times, if we also account for the one that is loaded by the browser. If you check, both add ingredient partial and update ingredient partial both return the updated or the newly added detail. This is why HTMX doesn't necessarily means I have one HTMX request, I have one template, and I have one view. This can be combined and can cause multiple things. So, because as you saw in the previous example, HTMX means a lot of templates, a lot of URLs, a lot of views, and a lot of tests, I wanted to quickly go how I structure things. This is not the only way to do it, but it's a good way. You can start from here. Maybe you can find something else, but what's important is you have your code well organized. Even when I was preparing the examples for this, I first started with, I don't know, need this, I'm just going to put it everything, and I was lost in like 10 minutes. So it's important because there are so many, you structure your code. I based everything on the views. So you turn your views into the package. Don't forget to put all the views in the init file so you can use it the way you're used to. Then name all the views related to single page as you visit it in the browser, put it in a single view spy file, and name all the views so you know by the first glance if there's a page, so loaded by the browser, or partial loaded by HTMX. I love using class-based views, generic views, to cover the easier things, the ones that are appropriate. For example, the frame usually can be just template view. The tests closely follow the views, and what's important, you know which views belong to which tests. The templates can be put in the same file, but I put it in the same directories, so their names follow, the directory names follow the views. As you can see, I put the page or partial differently from the views at the beginning, so I can know from the first glance the top one is the page, what's loaded by the browser, and everything else are the partial templates. URLs, similarly, you don't need separate files. You just need to put them in different lists. So again, they closely follow the URL patterns. As I mentioned quickly through disadvantages of HTMX, it's not a silver bullet. As you saw, quite a simple list required 6 templates. This, in my experience, is more or less the most you can get. After that, it gets bloated. So it doesn't manipulate the DOM if it's not a request-response thing. You can't hide elements on the page. You can't animate them. It's just used as a server communication. Obviously, if you're expecting more than one client, so a mobile app, it's not useful. It doesn't hold state, so if you need some more complicated thing like a shopping list, you can't use it. Or if you expect heavy front end, that again, it gets bloated, you can't really use it. It's also kind of hard to decouple because you suit everything to it. So start with planning what you actually need. So some final notes, which didn't have any place anywhere else, but the top one can be really annoying if you don't know it. You need to add a CSRF token as you're used to Django and Forum. You can make a request from anywhere in the HTML, so you can put the CSRF as you're used to in the Forum. The easiest way is to put it on the HTML body. So wherever you trigger your request from, button, forum, whatever, you can trigger it from wherever, you'll be covered. The examples I covered are actually quite similar to the ones that HTMX has on their website. It's not Django specific, but if you don't know where to start, it's a good idea to check those examples. They also have HTMX extensions. I don't think I mentioned the delete. There was this notice that the item was deleted that disappeared after a while. This is covered by the HTMX extension. You can't cover what's going on with the HTMX with PyTest. You need to use something front end. I used Cypress. It's kind of fun to use. If you don't know it, I just wanted to mention it. If you got the idea, but you don't know how to start with it, I wrote a course, as I mentioned at the beginning. It's on test-driven. If you're more interested in fast API than in Django, I'd like to mention that I also will have a fast API with HTMX course coming out. That's it from me. I think I was good at time.
Can you hear me? Yes, now it's working. It's working? Yes, it is. So we have four questions, and so we have, I think, plenty of time to answer them. First one is, have you ever had problems with caching, like Django that caches the HTMX response and just renders the partial template instead of a whole page, or vice versa?
No, I don't think so, but the truth is, I never worked with a bigger firm that uses HTMX. I just did a few of my own projects, which were not bloated, and as far as I know, until now, I didn't have the problems.
Okay. And have you ever had problems with OOB swaps?
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Okay. What kind of problems are you talking?
Like after the swap, the page scrolls in funny ways. Sometimes.
No, never, but you worked with HTMX. As I mentioned, you don't want to overcomplicate things. I never had that problem, but maybe if you had, there were too many things going on the page, and you should move to something more powerful. This is really wonderful code to improve things a little. I use it for, I don't know, when you send the message to us on the web page, the forum is replaced with the confirmation the message was sent. I'm working with React currently. This can't be done. If you need something more powerful, it's probably that.
And there are libraries like Django HTMX and Django template partials that help you deal with HTMX and Django. Do you have any opinions about them? Do you find them useful?
As I know, I don't know if it's maintained. I started using Django HTMX library, something like that. the code bytes guide did them or use them. But no, HTML, you include HTMX by adding JS tag to the HTML. So whatever it does, I know it was, the part I showed you where the template is replaced. This was the part that was covered by this library, and this is replaceable by 3 lines of code. So because it's so simple, I don't think you're going to need additional libraries.
Thank you. And one last question. I think we will have some more time for, yeah, just another one. So there are the file structure seems a bit complex. Is it possible to abstract away in a generic Django library the most common HTMX uses, like infinite scrolling, etc.?
If we check the example with updating the details or adding new details, this is a very similar code, but reusing it would require a lot more complications than just adding 3 additional things. So again, as I mentioned before, I'm sorry, that's a one-trick pony. Those HTMX covers simple cases. Once you need extractions and complications, and I don't know what, you're probably going to be better with something more powerful. Once you start thinking big, and I want this, and I want this, you're going to have trouble using HTMX at some point later on.
And how does the responsiveness and user experience differ when using React and HTMX? Like, it's faster, it's simpler, it's slower?
As I mentioned, I think what's the most important difference here, HTMX doesn't hold state. So for example, I use Trello for shopping. I don't know what's happening with our stores, but you can't use mobile phone in our stores. It doesn't work. So HTMX here wouldn't be appropriate. I can use Trello because it's some front end, and everything I add or remove from the shopping list will be updated once I get out and get the internet. HTMX doesn't do that. So since it doesn't hold state, it always needs to wait for the server response, and after that, it uploads it. React is faster because, as far as I know, React usually first updates what you see, and then it handles the server.
And there another question, but I think you just covered it. Is there any pattern for state management, even with limitation HTMX?
No, there's nothing. The only manipulation you can do, you can display just a chunk of HTML and instead of the whole response.
And one last question from Slido. Are there security concerns with using HTMX, especially injecting malicious code? Any specific regarding security we should
I think Django with CSRF token should cover at least big part of this. I was wondering myself this because I put the code, the CSRF on body, but I don't think that should be anything. But again, if you need a very powerful, very secure, you're gonna need something else. I don't want to put you off using HTML. It's a wonderful tool, but it's a tool. If you need something complicated at the front end, probably not the right answer. But it's a great tool for your websites, your own projects. I'm preparing an example. We're starting to talk with the client about their requirements. And I have I want this, okay, maybe I want this. I'm going to use HTMX for this. Probably at the end, when the full project will be developed, it will be something else. But HTML feels comfortable, it's fast, and I'm going to start with HTMX. Once they break their toy and they decide what actually they want, I'm going to use something stronger.
Thank you so much. And please.